Greetings all, this is Rick Levine with your March 2026 astrological forecast. I am recording this in Redondo Beach, California, having just finished up with the 4-day Conscious Life Expo at the Los Angeles International Airport Hilton. It was a very exciting weekend, and I was very proud to be a participant in that process, in that expo. I will be leading a 6-day course on how to read a natal chart using your own chart, starting on this Friday up in Buellton, California. And for those of you who feel like you missed it this year, there'll be more information on it later on, but I'll be doing it again next February in the same place. More information on that to follow. Before we get into the actual forecast for the month of March, I want to announce the winner of the March drawing. As most of you know, every month I pick a winner, one chart, one person from the email list, and my assistant Gail does that. And this month, the chart that was picked was for Yelena Drobak, and that was number 11614. This is done by random each month. And Yelena, you will receive an email from Gail, and we will schedule your free reading that includes the harmonic aspects in your chart. And congratulations. And thank you for being a participant and a supporter here. If you're not on the mailing list and you want to be eligible for this monthly drawing, go to my website, which is at www.ricklevineastrologer.com, and scroll down and sign up for the email list. I won't overload you with lots of stuff, but you'll get 1 or 2 or 3, maybe 4 emails a month, if that, from me, either on upcoming events or on what's going on, or when I post a new video on YouTube. And that takes care of that. Before we get into the actual dailies, and I should mention that if you're not interested in my upcoming events, just scroll on through. There'll be a link down at the very bottom of the description, and those links will take you to the day-by-day, the daily forecasts. And for everyone else, here's a few of the things I have coming up, and I have some very exciting things coming up. As many of you know, there will be no astrology night at Soul Food Coffee House for the next few months. I am on the road and will continue to be on the road. The following month, I will not be available because I will be on a cruise going through the Aegean Sea and the Greek islands. And this is the Mystery School at Sea. Right now, the boat is full, but there is a waiting list if you're interested. Finding out more about that, just go to mysteryschoolatSea.com. This is a 10-day cruise from Athens, Greece. And that's on March 20th to March 30th. On Friday, May 15th, I will be back in London for Shifts Happen 2, and this is the next transit. As many of you know, there was an incredible success from our first ever Shifts Happening back last May that I did with Steve Judd and a few other astrologers. And this year, there'll be again a 4-day residential astrology symposium that will bring together Penny Thornton, who is Princess Diana's astrologer, Alex Trenoweth, Darby Costello, Steve Judd, and me for an immersive journey into the cosmos, and this will be very, very exciting. Alex is doing her stuff on Jupiter. Well, she's doing it on Earth, but about Jupiter. Darby will be doing some material on Mars. Steve is going to be talking about Saturn transits and reinventing astrology in the second quarter of the 21st century. Personally, I'll be doing 2 lectures, one called On Beyond Saturn Transits, which is Awakening Imagination and Evolution, which is really Awakening is Uranus, Imagination Neptune, and Evolution Pluto. And I'll be doing a second lecture called Beyond Belief: Astrology, Consciousness, and the New Metaphysical Frontier, talking about reincarnation, past life therapies, crop circles, extraterrestrial intelligence, psychic mediums, artificial intelligence, and more. And this is kind of an exciting exploration into so many of the important things that are going on that may not seem directly related to astrology, but in fact, they are. And the astrology of all these things weaves a very interesting network of thoughts and ideas. And this again is Shifts Happen Too. And the link for this and for all the other events will be in the first pinned comment below. And this will be in London, actually, St. Albans in the United Kingdom, in the UK, May 15th through the 18th, coming up. The next event, and actually the following weekend after Shifts Happen Too, is NORWAC, the Northwest Astrological Conference. And this will be my 35th NORWAC that I've attended. I've missed two over the past 37 years. And I'll be doing the opening keynote on the future of astrology. And I'll be doing one lecture during the program. My lecture title is What the Fuck? An astrological update for residents of planet Earth in 2026. And then I'll be doing a post-conference workshop on Monday, May 25th. This conference is May 21st through the 25th. That's Memorial Day weekend in the United States. My post-conference workshop is titled Quincunxes and Beyond, working with yods, iron yods, also known as Thor's hammers, golden yods, and yods of fate. And for anyone who's explored or even thought about yods, this lecture is a real eye-opener because there's a lot more to yods than meets the eye. Then on August 18th through the 22nd, I'll be participating with a number of other astrologers, including Rachel Lang and Ann Ortley, and Cassandra Joan Butler, Kenneth Miller, several other astrologers. This is going to be a dynamic celebration into cosmic insight. And this is at Lilydale, which, as many of you know, is the home of the American Spiritualist Church. But whether you're new to astrology or even a longtime student of the stars, this week at Lilydale from August 18th through the 22nd invites you to explore fresh perspectives, to connect with community, and to discover new inspiration that is written in the sky. There's going to be 15 events during the week. And the link again for that and everything else is below. You can come for the entire week, or you can pick and choose the events that you want. There'll be individual daily workshops. There'll be evening lectures and panels. And I look forward to seeing many of you there. Then on Labor Day weekend, actually September 3rd through the 9th, is UAC, or the UAC, which is the United Astrology Conference. And the title of this UAC is Daring to Dream. UAC is an amazing event. There'll be nearly 140 lecturers from all over the world. This will be inarguably the largest astrology conference of the year, maybe of years coming and going. UAC is only held once every 4 or 5 years, and it's a confluence of energy that it's owned by a variety of the largest nonprofit astrology associations in the world. It's an amazing week. People from all around the world. This year, the conference is featuring Chani Nichols as the keynote speaker. I will be doing 2 lectures in the conference itself, and then a post-conference event. And that is UAC 2026, Daring to Dream in Chicago, Illinois. Lastly, I just want to mention that I will be back in Goa on November 9th through the 23rd. And this will be the same place that I've been teaching in Goa for the past several years at the Ayurvedic spa. That's just a short walk down to a gorgeous beach in the south end of Goa on the Arabian Sea, a little eco village that is absolutely a semi-rustic and lovely, lovely, lovely place. But this year, rather than doing the initiation into astrology for beginners, I'm going to be doing a program called Astrology in Motion, walking the path from knowledge to practice. And you can find out more about this by going to heavenandearthworkshops.com. Heaven and Earth Workshops has sponsored all of my international workshops over the years in Bali and Mexico, in India, and actually some in the United States also. But this is a 2-week advanced residential immersion. Astrology in Motion is really for those who are either practicing professionals, those may be preparing to work professionally at some point in time, or advanced amateurs who are just ready to move beyond foundational instruction. And rather than spending the week reviewing planet signs, houses, and aspects, this retreat is going to focus on the practical application of astrology, synthesis, timing, consulting skills, the realities of working with clients. We're going to be looking at how to navigate the balance between technique, intuition, and simply making human connections. I'm very excited about the curriculum. We're going to be drawing on the OPA model, which is their peer review program, which is a very exciting model that I've been involved with over the years. And I'm looking forward to this. Complete information and the total curriculum is available online at heavenandearthworkshops.com. And that, again, that is in Goa, India, November 9th to the 23rd, a full 2-week program, Astrology in Motion. And with that, we are ready to move into the astrology of March of 2026. So, it's been an incredible year so far, astrologically speaking, and that really has impacted everyone at every level of their lives, from personal to economic to trying to make long-term plans to dealing with our day-to-day lives to the uncertainty of rules and laws and immigration in the United States, actually around the world. It's been very, very complicated, very changeful. And as many of you know, I and pretty much every other astrologer on the planet has been talking about the Saturn-Neptune conjunction of February 20th, 2026. And of course, that is now in the past. However, it's important to understand that long-term, slow-moving transits like this are not in the past just in a few days or even a few weeks, or for that matter, even a few months. This is a 36-year cycle, the Saturn-Neptune cycle, and we're going to be feeling the ramifications of the disintegration, the dissolution of Saturn, of Saturn's reality of rules, of laws, of shared dreams, of shared myths, of social structures as Neptune melts that away. And then on the other side of that, we're going to see Saturn crystallizing some of the uncertainty that will kind of manifest as dreams and then crystallize into new structures over the months and even years ahead. So this is part of the background of March. And even though I won't be saying a whole lot more specifically about the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, I have other videos both on Astrology Hub and on my YouTube channel on Saturn-Neptune conjunction. But that Saturn-Neptune conjunction will be impacting the month of March and literally the entire summer, spring and summer and fall, as we move into the approaching trines between Uranus and Neptune, which got within a quarter of a degree last summer and fall, and will then make their first perfected exact trine in July, around July 17th. But that will be the first of 5 exact trines from July of 2026 all the way through the spring of 2028. And that is the next major scenario that will unfold on our plate. It will already be having impact now in March of 2026, and partly because the Saturn-Neptune conjunction occurred at the very, very close midpoint of Uranus and Pluto. Uranus at the very end of Taurus and Pluto at the very beginning of Aquarius. But over the next month, over the next couple of months, Uranus, having turned direct, will move back into Gemini, where it just touched into last year. And as Uranus moves into Gemini, by July, it will be making a trine with Pluto. And Uranus, the planet of shock and surprise and revolution and sudden change, making that flowing trine with Pluto, which is the planet of death and rebirth. And this isn't necessarily, matter of fact, it's not intended to be about physical death. It's about the metaphysical death and rebirth, the reorganization of ideas and constructs and even beings. A caterpillar becoming a butterfly. The caterpillar doesn't die. The caterpillar reorganizes in the darkness of the cocoon in the chrysalis stage to become a butterfly. And we as humans are at that point from now through 2028. As we move through this Uranus trine Pluto, we are moving from the state of caterpillar to the state of butterfly. And if that sounds like hyperbole or sounds like it's extraordinary, hold on to your hats, because that's what we are in for. And most importantly, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction occurred right at the middle of that looming trine. And therefore, we're looking at the crystallization of this process, even though Neptune, which is about the spiritualization, the metaphysical, is right in that mix and stays in that mix for the next few years. So that's what happens as we walk into the month of March. Another thing to understand and to consider is that we are coming off not only the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, but we are also coming off an eclipse, and that eclipse happened just a couple of days, 3 days actually, on February 17th, 3 days prior to the exact Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which has added to the uncertainty and the overwhelming craziness of those things which were considered to be conspiratorial and unimaginable and unbelievable years ago, when there was talk of the horrific things that are surfacing or have surfaced behind the apparent sex scandal that we have called the Epstein files, is kind of how we are referring to it. But it goes so far beyond I say just, I'm not minimizing it, but it goes so far beyond sex scandal. We're talking about human sacrifice and blood rights and blackmail and compromising people in power to have them then do your bidding. And this is not just about something in the United States. This is already impacting the United Kingdom, the UK, and Norway, and Belgium, and I mean, this is a worldwide scenario that has to do with Pluto, things in the underworld, things that were suppressed or repressed, coming out in the open, and we are certainly far from done with that, having had that eclipse on February 17th. followed by an eclipse that is going to be on March 3rd. The solar eclipse has already occurred, and that was square Uranus, very topsy-turvy. And we have the full moon eclipse occurring on March 3rd, and that kind of sets the tone for March. One other thing about the tone for March, and that is we enter March with Mercury in its retrograde phase. Mercury having turned retrograde on February 25th. It turns direct on March 20th. So most of March will be with a Mercury retrograde. And even after Mercury turns direct, it will still be in its shadow area that it goes through direct, then retrograde, and then direct a third and final time. And so we have a lot of reconsidering, reevaluation, reviewing. All the RE words are good to understand retrograde. It's to do something again, to see it from another perspective. So with all that having been said, let's jump into actually looking at the chart for March 1st. This is Sunday, March 1st. All these charts will be with an Aries rising, meaning that there is no horizon. There are no houses in use because you are all over the planet. And therefore, since houses and the horizon are always to a local perspective on the planet, we are only looking at the planets in their signs and the aspects they make with one another. All times that I give will be Pacific time. Pacific time changes to daylight time on the morning of March 8th. But I will be giving all times in local time for the Pacific time zone in the United States. You need to adjust to your time zone in order to get a time correct when I do talk about times. So here we are looking at the chart for March 1st. We can see that the sun is at 11 degrees of Pisces, and the moon is at 20 degrees of Leo. That moon will move from Leo into Virgo, and it will do that on the morning of March 2nd. We'll get there in just a moment. But before we do, we also need to note that Mars is just coming off of its square to Uranus. That was exact a couple of days ago, and that today, March 1st, and whenever I say today, I'm always referring to the chart that we are looking at on the screen. So today, Mars is at 29 degrees of Aquarius and 24 minutes. That's almost 29 and a half degrees. And if we move this chart ahead one day to March 2nd, we can see now that the moon has moved into Virgo. And as I mentioned, the moon moves into Virgo early in the morning on Monday at 4:33 Pacific time, 4:33 a.m., so that by noon the moon is at 4 degrees of Virgo, approaching the full moon, and this full moon is an eclipse. We can always tell visually, or often tell visually, when a full moon or new moon is an eclipse, because a full moon or new moon eclipse occurs when the full moon or new moon occurs near the north and south nodes of the moon. And we'll see how close this full moon eclipse is to the nodal axis, which even here on March 2nd, you can see is just a few degrees away from the sun. At 8, the north node of the moon is at 8 degrees, almost 9 degrees of Pisces, and the sun here is at 12 degrees of Pisces. But here on March 2nd, we also have something else occurring, and that is that we can see that Mars has now moved into Pisces, which means that as the moon moves into Virgo, it will make an opposition to the Mars, and that will stir up some energy, kind of almost as if we're getting ready for this eclipse. But as Mars is moving into Pisces, it does something else, and that is it makes a square and a half a sesqui-square to Jupiter. And those of you who know my work, you know that half squares and 1.5 squares, a half square is 45 degrees, half of 90 degrees, and a square and a half, or a sesqui-square, is 135 degrees, that these aspects are every bit as powerful as squares. And so as Mars makes that sesqui-square, square and a half with Jupiter, midday on March 2nd, there's going to be a tendency for overdoing, for overacting, for overextending our physical energy. And I think that this is just an important thing to keep in mind, because Mars in Pisces can be a bit uncertain about where it's going or how it's going to get there. It just knows it's going somewhere. And so I think that this is an interesting first taste of what March will be like as Mars is moving through the sign of Pisces. I mean, Mars has direction. In a way, Mars can't wait till it gets into Aries because there it's at home. But as it's going through Pisces, it's kind of floating along and not quite able to get its bearings. And so it has to rely on its intuition. It has to rely on its instincts. It has to rely on a sense of almost its psychic sense, if you will. And so Mars can sometimes feel a bit lost in Pisces, but I think its strength is its ability to find compassion in whatever it is that it's doing. Now, as we move to March 3rd, instead of just looking at the chart for noon, I'm going to look at the chart that actually is the chart for the moment of the eclipse itself. And the eclipse on March 3rd occurs at 3:37 a.m. 3:37 a.m. Pacific time. That's still Pacific Standard Time because daylight savings time doesn't start for a few more days. But we can see here that the moon is at 12 degrees Virgo and 54 minutes, almost 13 degrees. The sun is at 12 degrees Virgo and 12 degrees Pisces and 54 minutes, also almost 13 degrees. But we have a pileup of planets in Pisces: Mars, the North Node, the Sun, Mercury, which is retrograde, and Venus are all in Pisces, and the moon is opposing them. And this is kind of a study in how we need to have clarity. That would be the moon in Virgo, in order to be able to understand how to work with or how to embody all of those planets in Pisces, which are more metaphysical, whereas that moon in Virgo is quite physical. Another thing, there's a couple of things of interest about this eclipse. One of them is that on a larger sweep of events, we have planets, the heavyweight planets of Saturn and Neptune, having spent years, Saturn 2.5 years, Neptune 14 years, moving through Pisces. They have both only recently moved into Aries back in January and February of this year, where Saturn will be here in Aries for another 2 years, a little bit over 2 years, and Neptune will be in Aries for almost 14 years. And so this eclipse with the Sun, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, all the personal planets in Pisces, it's almost like a last holdout. It's like a last hurrah of Pisces, because something is happening as Pisces energy is needing to give up its hold on our beliefs, on our illusions, our dreams, our Piscean understanding based upon what we thought was fact. But as these planets move into Aries, starting already with Saturn and Neptune, it's like the rose-colored glasses are coming off. And over the days and weeks and even month or so ahead, we will see these planets one by one move out of Pisces and into Aries. Venus moves into Aries on March 6th. The Sun will move into Aries on March 20th. Mars will move Mars moved into Pisces on March 2nd, but it will move into Aries in April. And as these planets all move into Aries one at a time, they're all going to line up with Neptune and Saturn and kind of make things real. We also have not only Neptune and Saturn in Aries, but also Chiron and Eris. We'll have a bit more to say on them in a little bit. But just touching on that first, I think it's quite important to understand that Eris takes some 500 years to go around the zodiac once. Chiron takes 50 years. And so every 53 years or so, Chiron catches up to Eris, and it is in the process of doing that right now. And it will do that for the third and final time in this little run on March 19th. We'll get there in a few minutes. But the point here is that this eclipse is the last holdout of all these planets in Pisces, as they then will move into Aries and line up with Neptune and Saturn, and then with Chiron and Eris before moving on into Taurus. And this is the background to a larger sweep of the month of March. This is all on March 3rd. Now, aside from the eclipse, we also have another aspect or two that is quite important that are building, because this eclipse is harmonizing or trining with Jupiter. In fact, if you look at the moon's opposition to the sun, the full moon opposed the sun at almost 13 degrees of Pisces and 13 degrees of Virgo, we can see that Jupiter retrograde, almost ready to station direct. It will do that in just a week on March 10th. But Jupiter holding still for most of March, kind of not moving very much at all, is at the point of Thales for this full moon eclipse, meaning that Jupiter is being trined by the sun on one side and being sextiled by the moon on the other side, meaning that the Jupiter is kind of a release point to this stress or tension. But remember, at the same time, Jupiter is exacerbating that Mars is exacerbating Jupiter, because Mars, we had already established, is making that square and a half to Jupiter that was exact yesterday on the 2nd. This is an interesting dynamic, because this eclipse has Jupiter so much in the forefront of it that I think it's very, very important. The other thing that's happening at this eclipse time that's not exact until tomorrow is that Mercury, which is retrograde, is coming into a half square with Pluto. Now, because Mercury is retrograding over an area where it's already been, Mercury made a half square with Pluto back on February 19th. It's now retrograding over that exact half square point on March 4th. And then when it turns direct, and remember, it will turn direct on March 20th, but then it will make a third and final half square with Pluto on April 7th. Mercury, half square to Pluto. It's basically going back to mid-February all the way through the beginning of April. What does Mercury half square to Pluto mean? Well, Mercury, aside from being the trickster and the planet of communication, is also the guide of souls into and out of the underworld. Mercury is a psychopomp. Mercury is the way in which we are guided into the hell realms, the invisible realms, everything that's beneath the surface. And by the hell realms, I don't only mean the place we go to get punished in the Christian mythologies. I mean the place where magic happens, where it's the in-between states, the Bardo states in the Tibetan mythologies or philosophies. And when Mercury makes that half square to Pluto, which we've kind of been in this since the middle of February and won't work our way out of until the second week in April. But in the meantime, on March 4th, and certainly at this eclipse point, I mean, on the day of the eclipse, at the eclipse itself, Mercury is within 1 degree of that half square to Pluto. And what does this mean? Well, it means that there is an angst, a stress tied up from what is being communicated. Mercury, and remember, Mercury is retrograde. We're seeing things from another side, from another perspective. And in Pisces, Mercury is not at home because Mercury has a hard time speaking in logic and exactness while it's in dispersive Pisces. But making this half square to Pluto is basically suggesting that what's coming up from the underworld, what has been hidden, is not easy to integrate. This is complicated and it's uncomfortable, and this is part of what this eclipse is bringing out and bringing up. And with Jupiter so much in the mix, it's almost like enough, too much. And on top of that, we have Venus moving through the end of Pisces. Remember, Venus will move out of Pisces and into Aries on March 6th. But at the end of Pisces, let's move this ahead to March 4th, even though we're kind of still a little bit talking about the eclipse. But on March 4th at noon, we can see that Venus at 27 degrees of Pisces is making a partile sextile to Uranus. And Venus to Uranus, again, is stirring up new stuff. In some ways, this can be very exciting, but we're attracted to things that are out of the box. Things are coming into our perception that can get the adrenaline going. And at the same time, we can also see that the sun is inching closer to that exact trine to Jupiter. That's exact tomorrow on the 5th. But this is about a lot of new energy. A lot of stuff is coming to light. Let's move this. Oh, and we can also see that the moon has just moved from Virgo into Libra, and the moon actually moves out of Virgo and into Libra just before noon at 10:55 today, 10:55 a.m. on March 4th. And as the moon moves into Libra, it's also making a grand trine, sweeping from its trine to Uranus as it's at the end of Virgo. Once it moves into Libra, it's picking up on its trine to Pluto, while all those planets at the end of Pisces and beginning of Aries, the Venus and the Neptune and the Saturn, are all forming a kite. And this is significant because this is the same event that we're moving toward over the summer, when we'll have Pluto at 4 degrees of Aquarius and Uranus at 4 degrees of Gemini and the moon at 4 degrees of Libra and Neptune at 4 degrees of Aries, and the same kite energy will be with us. And so it's almost like we're being lured or pulled into the future. And coming off this eclipse, I think that this pattern of this kite with the moon at the apex of the kite and the Venus, Neptune, and Saturn all at the release point that are sextiling Venus, exactly sextiling Uranus on one side, and the Neptune and Saturn coming into the sextile with Pluto on the other side, while the sun is trining Jupiter. We move this ahead, and we can see now that the moon is in mid-Libra, and that the sun is now making its partile, same degree, 15 degrees Pisces to 15 degrees Cancer, that Sun-Jupiter trine, which is exact at 9:13 in the morning today. And again, this is often considered to be a really positive aspect because the energy flows. There's good stuff going on. It's confidence. It's expansion. It's big ideas. The problem is that how much is enough? And with too much good, big ideas, it can be overwhelming. And I never miss an opportunity when talking about Jupiter to remind ourselves that Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, said that too much of anything good is poisonous. The way he said it was too much or an excess of any tonic is toxic. We can see that even here on the 5th, Venus is still in Pisces, but it's at the last degree of Pisces, and we move to March 6th, and now we can see Venus has moved into Aries. It's conjoining up with Neptune. There's a bit of a mystery, a love of romance. Things can be a bit confusing here, but we also have Venus approaching Saturn, because remember, we're not getting Neptune without Saturn still. Even though Saturn is moving away from Neptune, it moves faster than Neptune. It was exact back on February 20th. Here by March 6th, the Venus-Neptune is over a degree separated away, but with Venus moving into Aries and lining up with Neptune today, and then lining up with Neptune tomorrow, moving into Aries today, lining up with Neptune tomorrow, the dream, and then lining up with Saturn on the 8th, this is a helter-skelter day of dreams becoming real, of having to deal with the hardship of the facts of the way things are. And we also have on March 6th, Friday, March 6th, the moon leaving Libra later this evening at 8:01 p.m. and moving into Scorpio. And when the moon moves into Scorpio, it's going to pick up on a square with Pluto. And so there can be a little bit of a complicating energy here. Let's move this ahead to the 7th. We can see that the moon now by noon is past its square to Pluto. Meanwhile, retrograde Mercury is backing up toward its exact trine to Jupiter. And remember, because Mercury goes direct, retrograde, direct, it often repeats certain aspects 3 times. We already talked about Mercury going into the underworld and bringing in communication of things that were hidden, things from the hell realms, things that had to do with things we don't ever want to know about, and yet now they're in our face. We can't help but knowing about them. And that's the Mercury half square to Pluto that we already talked about. But we also have now Mercury making its trine to Jupiter. Its first trine to Jupiter was also back in mid-February, the 16th. And now on its retrograde, its exact trine to Jupiter will be on March 8th. We'll get there in just a moment. We can move the chart ahead in just a moment, but we also need to note that today on March 7th, Mercury backed over the sun, looked like it goes retrograde, and Mercury is now behind the sun. There was an exact cazimi, meaning Mercury was in the heart of the sun. That exact conjunction perfected was at 3:01 a.m. this morning on March 7th. And yet today also, Venus makes that exact conjunction with Neptune at 3:27 a.m. This is like an intense, powerful day, and a day in which we can go into the other worlds, the dream time, the imagination, as long as we remember that we're planting seeds to make things real, because as we move this chart ahead one more day, and we have Mercury making that exact trine to Jupiter, while the moon moving through Scorpio makes a grand water trine, and so emotions are flowing freely now. And yet at the same time, we have Venus catching up to Saturn, which is saying, wait a minute, and this is exact in the morning at 6:39, but we'll be feeling it all day, that Venus conjoining Saturn is basically saying, wait a minute, we just can't run our feelings ahead. We can't be attracted to anything. We can't just run off the map. We have to make it real. We have to ground things. We have to pull back. And at the same time today, we have Mercury retrograding back through its second of 3 trines to Jupiter. Remember, I said its first trine was mid-February on the 16th. Its second trine on the retrograde is today on March 8th. And that's exact at 10:23 p.m. today on the 8th. And then once it turns direct, it will make that third and final trine on April 3rd and so there's this whole sense of not only bringing things up from the hidden, from the suppressed, from the bacchanalian, underworld of everything that's suppressed and repressed, but at the same time, it's too much. That Sun trine Jupiter is just saying too much. It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. We move ahead one more day, and we can see that the moon has moved into Sagittarius. It does that at 8:36 this morning on Monday, March 9th. And as the moon moves into Sagittarius, it's going to pick up on trines midday to Neptune, Saturn, and to Venus, all in Aries. So there's a bit of positive energy here. I think that March 9th is an interesting day because we also have Venus making a sextile with Pluto. And remember, the Mercury half square to Pluto was very uncomfortable. Venus's sextile with Pluto, in some ways, is saying now that we're doing this deep dive into the hidden Plutonic realms, there's something here that's really important. We need to face this dark energy and overcome it. And we have support if we're willing to move into it and through it and beyond it. I think it was Winston Churchill who said, when you're walking through hell, keep going. In other words, the way out is the way through. And it's not like backing up or going into denial, or waking up out of the dream and having it go away. Those aren't solutions. The solution is facing what it is in the underworld and meeting it head on and working with the energy to overcome it. This is all on March 9th. Now, by the 10th, we have the sun making that same half square with Pluto that Mercury did before. And again, the energy here is not feeling comfortable again here on the 10th. But we also have Jupiter turning direct today. Now, a lot of astrologers will say, oh, the energy frees up, things begin to move. Well, when the slower moving planets station to turn direct or retrograde, this is stationing to turn direct after being retrograde, it actually slows down and it appears not to move. And in fact, if we back Jupiter up a couple of days, it's barely moved a moment. It's at 15 degrees of Cancer and 5 minutes. And, in 2 or 3 days, it barely moves 1/60th of a degree, 1 minute of arc. And so Jupiter's really holding its own position right now, but the energy is beginning to shift. And these are all important because we have a couple of quieter days here, and quiet doesn't mean nothing happens. What is significant is that on the 11th in the evening, the moon moves out of expansive Sagittarius and into Capricorn, where things become a bit more sober, somber. The moon moves into Capricorn at 9:07 p.m. on Wednesday night. And here, as we look at it by Thursday, we can see that the moon is already past its squares to Neptune and Saturn and still coming into its square to Venus. We have some, what's the word I'm looking for? Some engagement of energy of how to push forward into the future. That would be all those planets in Aries. And that moon in Capricorn says, wait a minute, this is heavier than you think it is. We need to sit with this. This is really serious stuff. We are getting a little bit of respite because the moon is also making a sextile with Mars today also. It'll do that just early afternoon. But all in all, here on the 12th, there's no exact aspects being made. It's not until we get to the 13th that we can see that Mars, which even on the 12th is already partile, meaning same degree, as the nodal axis, by the 13th, Mars actually is perfected, its exact degree and minute lined up with the nodes. And here we have something that's about transposition of energies through time and space, that are some things coming in from the past, having impact now, or retrocausally, things from the future coming into the present, having impact now. I think March 13th is a very potent day. And we're also coming into the fact that Mars, as it's lining up with the nodes, is also making half squares with Chiron and Eris. And now we come back to the Chiron Eris story that I mentioned earlier. And I said that I would come back to it because Chiron, the wounded healer, the mentor, the teacher, lines up with Eris, the sower of discord, Mars's sister. Eris stirs up energy to see what doesn't fit in, to see who's being disenfranchised, to see who's being excluded, so that it can be included. There's a reason why things are being stirred up. And when Chiron and Eris get together, and they've been in process of being really close together since last spring. In fact, the first of the three conjunctions occurred at the end of May, May 26th. Last year, 2025. And then on the retrogrades, they were exact again in conjunction on October 8th. And now for the third and final time, they will be in exact conjunction on March 19th. Right now, on March 13th, they are a quarter of a degree apart. They're 15 minutes of arc apart. And what's significant is that they are at that point making a half square to the nodal axis, while Mars coming through that point is stirring it up. I think March 13th is going to be a complicated and difficult day, because the energy is really, we have the opportunity for healing, but it's almost like we can do things with good intention, and maybe it won't work that way, or maybe it really takes effort and energy to settle energies down, because things are being stirred up. Mars makes the conjunction with the nodal axis on the 13th. And then by the 14th, Mars makes the half square with Chiron. Also, the moon shifts into Aquarius, still Sirius, still Saturn related, but now it's moving toward its conjunction with Pluto. And so there's a globalization here. There's a collectivization. There's a community kind of side to this energy, even a technology side to the moon in Aquarius. It does that at 8:13 this morning on March 14th, on Saturday, March 14th. And the moon then will line up with Pluto somewhere around 6 p.m. this evening, in that range. But the other thing to note here on the 14th is that Mercury is backed up to almost being aligned with Mars. It will do that exactly tomorrow. But what's significant now is Mars is making its half square with Chiron and Eris today on the 14th. If I move this ahead to the 15th, we now have Mercury backed up over that Mars. The Mercury-Mars conjunction was early this morning at 1:07, and Mercury-Mars can be tough because Mercury is fired by the adrenaline of Mars. We can be a bit overly forceful in what we say, and we can say things a bit prematurely or maybe overstate it, and it can be complicated. Mercury and Mars together can be quite forceful. But most importantly, as that Mercury backs over Mars, which, remember, yesterday was making exact half squares with Chiron and Eris, as Mercury lines up with Mars early this morning, Mercury by later in the day, well, actually by noon, Mercury will have made its half square with Eris and with Chiron, which now are only 10 minutes, 10 arc minutes apart. That's 1/6 of a degree. And this is tough stuff. This is complicated. This is the desire to heal, but stirring stuff up. This is, I think, very complicated energy, and this is all on the 15th. We can also see that Venus is moving toward its half square with Uranus. And I think that this is going to make this 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th period really, really complicated, because Venus making a half square with Uranus, that's exact on the 16th. We move ahead to the 16th, and we can see at noon, the moon is at 27 degrees of Aquarius on the 16th, which means that the moon will move into Pisces at 4:15 this afternoon. But meanwhile, the moon at the end of Aquarius is making a square to Uranus. Again, the unexpected, the complicated. Things are breaking out from where they were, or breaking through their shock, their surprise, as if we haven't had enough all through January, February, and now into March. This can be, I think, a bit overwhelming. Venus makes its exact half square to Uranus at 6:26 p.m., and then Mercury retrograding by the 17th in the mid-morning. Let's move the chart ahead to the 17th. We can see that the moon is now in Pisces, lining up with the nodal axis. By noon, again, we have these time shifts, these things coming through wormholes, things that are just kind of leaking from other dimensions, other times, other spaces, karma coming around to fruition. This is all on March 17th, and Mercury is making its exact conjunction with the North Node at 10:08 a.m., and Venus is moving closer and closer to its square to Jupiter. That's exact tomorrow. Let's move this ahead to the 18th. And we can see that we're also coming into the new moon. But here at noon, we can see that the moon is still about 4 degrees, 3 degrees or so away from the sun. And here on the 18th, we also have the sun and therefore the moon making a sextile with Uranus. Let's look at the chart for the new moon. And now this is a bit farther away. So this is from the node. So this is not an eclipse. We can see here, this chart is for 6:23 p.m., and we can see that the moon is now conjoined with the sun, almost 20 degrees away from the North Node, from the nodal axis. But this new moon is, again, very, very potent. Remember, the previous lunation, the full moon, was square to Uranus. This new moon is sextile to Uranus. What does that mean? It means the changes that 2 weeks ago were dysfunctional, were upheaval, had upheaval to them, that were shocking, were surprising. Now it's almost like we have the sensibility to work with this change. Changes are unfolding, they're happening. And on top of that, we have now Mars moving into its trine to Jupiter. I don't think things are easy here. Venus is squaring to, Jupiter. That Venus square Jupiter is exact this morning at 9:08 a.m. But I think the fact that this new moon is sextile to Uranus is basically letting us know that we will be able to find a way into the future, and that there is some hope in the process that we are on, and that also we are coming into the exact third and final conjunction between Chiron and Eris. You can see here at the time of the eclipse that Chiron and Eris are they're just barely 1 minute of arc apart. Let's move this chart to the 19th, and we can now see that Chiron, moving faster than Eris, is just 1 minute of arc ahead of Chiron, still within 1/60th of a degree. But this exact conjunction occurred at 4:08 this morning, 4:08 a.m. And now we can also see that with the moon having moved into Aries, and today at noon on Thursday, the 19th, we can see that the moon has already passed over Neptune and Saturn and is coming up to Venus and heading toward its conjunction with Eris and Chiron. That'll be exact over the next day and a half. But this is really potent energy because we now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 planets in Aries, and the sun is just about ready to shift from Pisces into Aries. If we move this ahead to the 20th, we now see that we have the sun and the moon and Venus and Saturn and Neptune and Chiron and Eris in Aries. And again, that Pisces energy is being left behind. Mercury is now moved backward, apparently backward, retrograded as far as it's going to get. It stations today. It begins to inch slowly forward, and that Mercury will begin to gain speed over the days ahead. And by the new moon in Aries, we'll have a pile up in Aries. And being in Aries, I'm looking forward to it. Anyhow, today on the 20th, the sun actually moves into Aries at 7:45 a.m. Now, this is the degree where the Saturn-Neptune conjunction occurred back a month ago on February 20th. Saturn and Neptune are now almost 2.5 degrees apart, Saturn quickly moving away from that conjunction. But the sun hitting that exact point is going to re-stimulate that energy and will continue to over the next 4 or 5 days as the sun exactly joins up with Neptune on the 22nd and then catches up with Saturn by the 25th. We're going to be getting almost like an instant replay over a few days of that same energy of what is real, what is fake, can you believe what's happening, crystallizing the dream and softening or making what we thought was real to be not the truth at all. This is all on the vernal equinox on March 20th. As we get to the 21st, we can see that retrograde Mercury, that Mercury, which was retrograde, has now turned direct. But what's also happened is that Mars is now making its exact trine to Jupiter. And again, we're one day after another, going back to the sun trined Jupiter back on March 5th. Mercury trine Jupiter on March 8th. We now have Mars trining Jupiter on the 21st. This is all about how much can we take. This is, it's confidence, it's hope, it's optimism, but it can be so much blue sky that it just becomes too much. It's overload, it's overwhelm. This is all on the 21st, but it can be highly optimistic and highly expansive. And this is also a time in which to plant the stake of reality into our dreams, because the sun's conjunction with Neptune by tomorrow. Oh, before we move there, we need to note also that the moon has left Aries and moved into Taurus, and it did that it did that late last night on Friday the 20th, and here by the 21st we can see at noon it moved into Taurus at 11:35 p.m. on Friday night. Here on Saturday we can see that the moon is already at 7 degrees of Taurus. And as we move ahead to the 22nd, we can now see that the sun has conjoined with Neptune, just a few minutes of arc, 20 minutes of arc past Neptune. That exact conjunction was at 4:18 a.m. Again, this is about the dream, but don't get too lost in the dream because the sun will join up with Saturn by the 25th. At the same time today, we also have Mercury now moving direct, going back over the nodal axis, which had just joined up with just a few days on the retrograde. That Mercury playing, almost stationing, hanging out, going back and forth over the nodal axis, kind of keeping that portal open into the past and into the future. These are some pretty damn powerful days. And it's hard to say anything about any one particular event, but it's almost like, I mean, there's this sense of AI and ET and everything kind of all joining up and kind of rattling us and pulling us, into some realm where we've never been before, but we're still getting ready for the major shifts that are going to happen later this summer, as crazy as that might feel. Now, also remember that I'll go over the day by day in much greater detail when I do the mid-month update around March 15th, and that's available to Patreon subscribers at the $3 a month level. If you're not at that level, it's just $3. You can sign up for it, and there's no requirement to stay on if you're not happy, or if you want to, you can, go off that level just as easily as signing up on Patreon. But I spend more time on the second half of the month really drilling down. But here we are on the 22nd with the moon moving through Taurus, catching up with Uranus. It'll do that later tonight, actually early tomorrow morning, depending upon where you are in the planet. There's about 6 degrees here, so it'll be right around midnight when the moon catches up with Uranus and really stirs up that energy again. In fact, the moon moves out of Taurus and into Gemini at 1 a.m. Monday morning, tomorrow morning. That's on the 23rd. Let's go there. And we have a couple of days again now. It's almost like we have some integration time. The moon in Gemini on Monday, the 23rd, by noon is going to make a trine with Pluto, and it's making sextiles earlier today on Monday with Neptune and the Sun and Saturn. And in a way, this is all about integration. It's the opportunity of taking things into the future. Change is unfolding, change is occurring. This is all on Monday, the 23rd. As we move to the 24th, the moon is also still moving through Gemini. At noon, it's at 20, almost 21 degrees of Gemini. We can see now that the sun is catching up to Saturn. It doesn't do that until early tomorrow morning. That's Wednesday. Let's move the chart to noon on Wednesday, the 25th. And we can see that the sun has now overtaken Saturn. That conjunction occurred at 1:55 a.m. And again, this is a get real, get serious, feel like a roadblock. The moon moving into Cancer. The moon moved into Cancer at 3:32 this morning, and therefore it's making squares with Neptune first, and then by noon today with Saturn and the Sun. March 25th can be a bit of a kind of meeting up with a reality check, another having to deal with things that are possibly in the way of us moving forward. This is all around March 25th. Also on the 25th, we have the sun making a sextile with Pluto. Remember, the sun and Mercury both made half squares with Pluto, which were very disruptive. Now the sun is making a sextile with Pluto. And in fact, Saturn is coming into a sextile with Pluto by the 28th. I think we're finally getting a sense of potential stabilization over some issues. It may not stabilize everything enough, but there's some things that are building here because Saturn joined up with Pluto back in January of 2020, which is kind of the kickoff of the COVID and the quarantine and the feeling like Earth had a stroke where everything just stopped. And now we have Saturn making its one and only sextile, opening sextile, the sun on the 25th kind of being a little bit of foreshadowing of what may be around the bend. As we move to the 26th, we have Mercury making a half square to Venus, and we actually have Mercury and Venus both kind of creating some difficult stuff. Mercury making a half square to Venus, while Venus is joining up with Eris and Chiron. This is all going on from March 25th, 26th, 27th. And even by the 27th, when Mars makes its half square to Pluto, this is not easy energy. We can see here on the 26th that Mercury's making a half square to Venus, but it's also coming into that half square to Eris on the 26th and a half square to Chiron by the 27th. We have the moon moving through Cancer. By mid morning, the moon will line up with Jupiter. Again, a feeling of like too much. Is just like so much going on. It's hard to incorporate it all. By Friday, the 27th, we have Mercury making its half square with Chiron, Mars making its half square to Pluto. This can be militarily disruptive. This can be kind of an expression of assertion or aggression that in some way goes back to what was going on back in January, February, March of 2020. Saturn sextile to Pluto is within 7 minutes of arc. It's exact by tomorrow. The 28th, we'll get there in just a moment, but we also need to note that by noon on March 27th, on Friday, the moon moves into Leo. It did that at 7 a.m. By noon, it's almost 3 degrees of Leo, and it's moving into an opposition to Pluto as Mars is making a half square to Pluto. This is unstable, and we also have Saturn coming into that sextile to Pluto. That will be exact by Saturday. We move the chart ahead to the 28th, and we can see the exact sextile between Saturn and Pluto. And this is the ability to make stable changes. It's an opportunity to be efficient in organization and structuralization. Is that a word? In making structures. I think the end of March is very complicated because there's a lot of disruptive energy, and behind it there's some stabilization. We have the moon moving through Leo. By the 29th, it is at the end of Leo, the last degree of Leo at noon, which means that it moves into Virgo at 12:33 p.m. today on March 29th. And we can see that the moon here will make trines to Eris and Chiron and Venus on Sunday morning before it moves into Virgo. It'll also make a square to Uranus. And so we have some smooth energy and some disruptive energy all at the same time. What does that mean? It means that there's potential for healing, but things may come out into the open that we, once again, did not or do not expect. This is all on March 29th. We also note here on the 29th that Venus is past its conjunctions with Eris and Chiron, which certainly stirred up that energy. And that was back on the 26th and 27th. And here by the 29th, we can see that Venus is at almost 29 degrees of Aries. We move ahead to the 30th, and at noon, Venus has just tipped into Taurus, and we're getting here the beginning of some stabilization from the difficulty, complexity, and craziness of all that energy in Aries, but we're not done with it yet because we still have Mercury and Mars to move into Aries, and by 2 weeks from now, by mid-April, when the moon comes all the way around through Pisces and then back into Aries, we're going to have that crazy lineup in Aries. The Venus, though, moving into Taurus, I think is a bit of a saving grace, even though it will make a square to Pluto over the first few days of April, and that can be a bit difficult. I think because Venus is at home in Taurus, there's a little bit of settling of the energy, and that is just a whole lot of energy that leads up to the end of the month. Again, in summary, I think that March is again more of a roller coaster. I don't think the energy is going to settle down until later this summer. This is the time of, not the time of year, but the time of the decade that we astrologers have been talking about for years. 2020, January, February, March of 2020, with all the planets moving through late Capricorn, and Saturn and Jupiter and Pluto all coming together through 2020 set the tone for the 20s. And yet this late winter, early spring, into the spring, and on through midsummer of 2026, I think is the most dynamic turning point that we're going to see. And all I can say is to, keep breathing, is to pay attention to keeping your feet on the ground. Don't get swept up in the illusion of what's happening out there, and yet pay attention to what's happening behind what the news is, behind what they're telling us to think and what to believe. Remember, so much of our realities these days is being curated. We feel sorry for these people because the news tells us to. We look at that with horror because the news tells us to. Look beyond these things because there's more going on than meets the eye. And yet during March, I think layers and layers and layers more will continue to come out that will help us make the decisions that we need to make through the spring and summer of 2026. Think cosmically, push your mind out as far as you can, be open to things that you didn't believe. Remember, Saturn and Neptune coming together is still with us, even though it was exact the end of February. This is not about having new answers. This is about the realization that our old answers do not work. Again, this goes beyond any religious or political beliefs. It goes beyond worldviews. Whatever we thought was true probably wasn't. And we all need to open our minds to new perspectives because we're going to either all make it through this together or we're not. Think cosmically, act locally, be safe, and I'll see many of you for the mid-month around March 15th or 16th. That's it. Peace out. I'm Rick Levine. See you all soon.